The World Health Organization is aiming to reduce the global suicide rate by 10% by the end of this decade. According to the WHO's first ever comprehensive report on suicide, someone takes their life every 40 seconds around the world, but only 28 countries, including Australia, have a national prevention strategy.
Well, the report calls for action to address this problem, which is the second leading cause of death in the 15 to 29-year-old age group globally. Professor Diego Della is the director of the Australian Institute for Suicide Research and Prevention at Griffith University in Queensland. He was also involved in the preparation of this landmark report, and he joins us live now from Brisbane. Professor, thanks very much for your time this evening. Why is it only now for this globally important, this globally enormous problem that we have this comprehensive global report?
Well, certainly WHO took a major step ahead in promoting prevention of this possibly the worst of human tragedies, because it's not only a suicide in terms of deaths, but it's also the number of attempted suicide, which is at least 20 times higher. So it's a phenomenon of very large dimension. In some countries it's an increasing phenomenon. Globally, fortunately, it has been a bit declining, which is something probably due to the huge improvement in many countries of the global health conditions, and also for many countries also in improving their quality of life. Particularly the ex-Soviet bloc countries or even China have massively improved their lives, and so this has been presumably reflected also in figures for suicide. So a major impact in the world, a major impact also on the lives of those who survive death to a suicide, and something that is not forgotten, something that lasts for the rest of the life of individuals, and perpetuates also the message that suicide exists, that suicide can be a bad problem-solving strategy, and that suicide is something that presumably will continue to affect the population. So the imperative is to preventing as much as we can.
Professor, the suicide rates varied enormously from country to country in this report, obviously taking into account social, religious, cultural and economic differences, but there were stark similarities, basically the pressure that causes that extreme distress. Can you talk about that similarity, those pressures, and why across all these different cultures there is that commonality?
Well, there are so many complex issues embedded to suicidal behavior, which is just a behavior. It's not a disease, which means that this behavior can recognize so many different roots. Religions, spiritual values, moral values of a society, traditions, previous frequency of suicidal behavior, anomie, a lack of rules or deteriorations of moral values, etc. All of that contributes differently among countries. So we can have countries in which suicide rates are less than 1 per 100,000, like several Muslim countries, for example. Syria is one of these countries, and countries where rates can be up to 110 times higher. Like Guyana or Suriname in South America, or even Korea, which is closer to us. So huge disparities that immediately draw our attention to the 1,000 or million factors that may contribute to the phenomenon, not only to one cause.
Professor, by virtue of some of the countries and territories you were mentioning there, that puts paid to the perception that suicide is predominant in the first world, that this is primarily a first world problem.
Well, no, in the sense that suicide occurs depending on situations, depending on major social changes, for example. Of course, particularly in most advanced countries, is very much embedded to mental disorders, drug and alcohol abuse, and the stigma that still affects this area, and is something on which we need to work more intensively than what we are doing.
Professor, you've written extensively about suicide. This is really your passion, your life's passion and work. You've written also about the human spirit and its ability to find its way back from the darkest of places. What gives life to the human spirit when all else seems hopelessly lost?
Oh, this is a very big question. I can answer probably indirectly. Something that we should consider is giving meanings to life. We don't have to limit suicide prevention to the isolation and treatment of mental disorders, for example. We need to give a higher quality of life to people, opportunities to lives to people, and especially, if we can, meanings in the lives of individuals. Meanings means clearly hope, and without hope it is very difficult to continue living. So one of the tasks that we have, one of the tasks that I have for the rest of my life is try to convince the government and the governments around the world to make it of suicide prevention an issue that touches every sector of society, not just health. We need to get involvement of education, we need to get involvement of the judiciary, of social welfare, the business environment, corrective services, etc. So we really need an overarching position, something that may make it not the responsibility of a single minister, but the cabinet, so the entire government.
And Professor, how confident are you that all those various elements, government, health workers, the community at large, will work together to bring about that WHO goal of reducing suicide rates by 10% by the year 2020? Will that be achieved, do you believe?
Well, it is achievable. Certainly, it's the changes would be more evident, presumably, in countries that now have less. Countries that are more advanced, technically more equipped, with higher standard of living, need to operate in a more sophisticated way. That's why for a country like Australia, for example, it is imperative the coordination of large programs embedded to the entire population and the entire governance of the country, because otherwise I can see only minimal achievement in terms of decline in suicide rates. It's really important that we cooperate and we work together, but we can make it.
Professor Diego De Leo joining us live from Brisbane. We so appreciate your time tonight, your insights and your contribution to such an important issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Professor.